being one amongst 3 of his parents' only surviving children out of 21, we could say that this man had to be alive to serve a great purpose. Yes, a purpose to create one of the best musical notes history has ever known. He may have encountered a few challenges along his musical journey, but what makes you successful if you don't have an interesting story to tell about your success? This musician lived quite an interesting life and was highly successful too. This is why we'll be talking about the lifetime of this great musician, Enrico Caruso. The birth of Enrico Caruso took place in Naples, in the Via Sante Giovanni I Pelo, on the 25th of February, 1873. His parents, Anna and Marcellino Caruso, hailed from a place called Piedemonte di Life, now known as Piemonte Matisia in southern Italy. Although his parents gave birth to 21 children, Enrico and his 2 other siblings were known to be the only surviving children, as the remaining 18 died in infancy. Enrico's father, Marcellino, who worked as a mechanic and a foundry worker, he thought that Enrico should also take up the trade and follow in his footsteps. When Enrico was 11, he apprenticed a mechanical engineer who constructed public water fountains. Enrico seemed to have gone a little deeper into the mechanical trade, because during his family visits to Naples, he would later point out a fountain that he assisted in installing back then. Enrico even worked with his father at a factory called Muracofri in Naples. His mother, on the other hand, insisted that he get some education, and Enrico got basic education under the tutelage of a local priest in Naples. There he learned how to write beautifully and also studied technical draftsmanship. In between working at the factory and getting schooled, Enrico also sang in the church choir, and his singing talent proved enough for him to venture into music in the future. Before her death in 1888, Enrico's mother Anna saw how great his talent was, and she encouraged him to start a musical career. Enrico's musical journey started when he became a street singer in Naples, mainly because he needed some money to fend for his family. In addition to that, he also performed at sororities and various cafes. His singing was good enough to even buy him a pair of new shoes after he performed at an Italian resort at age 18. Enrico started to see a long musical career ahead of him, and he was so determined that even when he had to go for a compulsory of 45 days of military service, he did not waste any time to resume his music lessons immediately after he got discharged from the army. Afterward, Enrico participated in a grand concert at La Scala in 1901, an event organized to mark the death of Giuseppe Verdi at the time. He performed alongside 2 other leading Italian musicians, Francesco Tomigno and Giuseppe Borgatti, who were both quite important to Verdi's life. In December of 1901, Enrico Caruso made his debut. This was at the San Carlo Opera House in Naples, and he was fairly received by the audience there. A couple of weeks later, he appeared at Des Grues in Massenet's Manon, and the audience had mixed feelings about his performance. He got harsh reviews and so much indifference to his songs in his native land, and this upset him so much that he vowed to never perform in Naples again. But that did not mean Enrico's journey was over. Enrico Caruso ventured on his last series of La Scala performance in March of 1902, creating the main tenor part of Federico Lo in Germania by Alberto Franchetti. Enrico got an invite from the gramophone company later in April to make his first batch of recordings. They also agreed to pay him a fee of £100 sterling, and his discs quickly became bestsellers. The recording house also helped boost Enrico's fame, and they spread the word about his talent and his music across the English-speaking world. He also worked at the Covent Garden, where he was signed by the management of London's Royal Opera House for a season of appearances in 8 different operas, ranging from Verdi's Aida to Mozart's Don Giovanni. On the 14th of May, 1902, Enrico Caruso made a successful debut at the Covent Garden, where he performed as the Duke of Mantua with Nellie Melba, who performed as Gilda in Giuseppe Verdi's Rigoletto. In 1903, his debut was featured in a new production of Rigoletto. Enrico and Nellie sang together for a few more times during the early 1900s, and it seemed that Enrico left quite an impression for Melba to praise him in her memoirs, as she said he was a talented singer. But she did not think he was as great and sophisticated as Gene Deresky, Met's most talented tenor draw card before Enrico. Enrico Caruso made a name for himself with his musical talent, and we've got much more to tell you about this music artist. But first, take a moment to hit the like button and then subscribe to our channel so you can find out more about some of our best tenor artists in history. As he was getting more popular across the world, Enrico moved to New York City in 1903, where he made his debut with the Metropolitan Opera. While being engaged with performances in London and New York, Enrico Caruso still made several others across South America, Italy, and Portugal. Some months later, Enrico got into a music contract with the Victor Talking Machine Company. On the 1st of February 1904, he created his first American records while he was signed to the Victor's label. I mean, the financial deal was so great, Enrico signed to be with the label for as long as he lived. Throughout his life, Enrico Caruso gave various recitals and operatic performances in Canada and across various cities in the U.S. His fame also reached cities like Hungary, France, Monaco, Germany, Belgium, and Austria, where his songs were heard before the occurrence of World War I. But that's not all. Enrico reappeared at the Covent Garden in the 1900s and also in 1913 through 14 during his vast performances across Europe. Remember Nellie Melba, with whom he performed Verdi's Rigoletto? Yep, she did ask him to perform with her again on her upcoming tour in Austria, but Enrico politely declined her offer due to the large amount of time the tour would take. By 1906, Enrico had joined the Met. Once in April of the same year, members of the Met's roster artists, included Enrico, visited San Francisco for a few performances. Little did they know that this was going to be a life-changing event for them all. A few hours after Enrico's appearance as Don Jose in Carmen at the city's Grand Opera House, he woke up from a sudden jolt, and a few moments later, Enrico found himself in the middle of the San Francisco earthquake. The terrible occurrence led to fire outbreaks, which destroyed more than half the city. The Mets lost their costumes, sets, and musical instruments, but thankfully, none of them lost their lives. But we're pretty sure that the incident did remain in their hearts for as long as they lived. Even though Enrico somehow managed to eat in the hotel, he took the first boat out of the city and vowed to never go to San Francisco again, and he did keep his promise. Enrico Caruso can be said to have made a lot of money since his audience for his Met performances was mostly wealthy people. But it was not restricted to the rich alone, as various middle-class Americans also paid to hear Enrico's songs. He has a huge fan base, and New York's 500,000 Italian immigrants instantly took a liking to one of their own. Enrico was also a charitable man. He did a lot of charitable works during World War I in 1917 to help fund war-related causes. He was also a smart businessman and investor since the period he stepped into America. Most times he put most of his earnings from record royalties and his singing fees into various investments. Reports show that Enrico Caruso's annual income tax bill summed up to $154,000 by the end of World War I in 1918. Enrico's final recordings were on the 16th of September, 1920. He recorded several songs, including Damini Deus and Crucifix from the Petite Messa Solanella by Rossini. Starting from the late 1920s, Enrico's health began to deteriorate. A pillar crumbled on his back, close to his left kidney. Later on, he developed a cough and severe pains on his side, and after a few tests, he was diagnosed with intercostal neuralgia. On the 11th of December 1920, Enrico suffered a throat hemorrhage, and by Christmas, the pain on his left side got worse. Through the months, his health deteriorated further, and he was advised to remove his kidney. But he could not go through with this process, as Enrico died in his hotel on the 2nd of August, 1921. Enrico Caruso was one of the most famous music personalities of his time. It can be said that Enrico had a joyful and somewhat smooth musical journey throughout his life because he knew what type of music he wanted to put out to the world. With his determination and strife, nothing was stopping him. Enrico's name became known across the world as he was plastered everywhere in newspapers, magazines, even in the new media of the 20th century, the telephone, cinema, and telegraph. Enrico was an enigma, and all through the history of classical music, he will be forever known. Thanks for watching today's video. If you enjoyed it, leave a like and subscribe.